It's the night before Thanksgiving, 1971. A man in a dark suit and sunglasses sits in the back of a passenger jet, calmly sipping a bourbon and soda. He hands a folded note to the flight attendant. She thinks he's a lonely businessman passing along his phone number, and she drops it into her purse without reading it. He leans over and says very quietly, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." 4 hours later, that man will jump out of the back of a Boeing 727 into a freezing storm, thousands of feet over the Pacific Northwest, with $200,000 strapped to his body, and he will never be seen again. Not his body, not his parachute, almost none of the money. 50 years later, it is still the only unsolved skyjacking in the history of American aviation. Nobody, not the FBI, not the airlines, not a single obsessive amateur detective in half a century has ever proven who he was. Tonight we walk through exactly what happened, and exactly why it has never been solved. It's the afternoon of November 24th, 1971, at Portland International Airport. In his mid-40s walks up to the Northwest Orient counter. He's calm, polite, unremarkable, a business suit, a black tie, a white shirt. He buys a one-way ticket to Seattle for $20 and gives his name as Dan Cooper. He boards Flight 305, a Boeing 727, and takes a seat near the rear of the cabin. He orders a bourbon and soda. He lights a cigarette. You could still do that in 1971. And a few minutes after takeoff, he passes that note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. When she finally reads it, it tells her he is carrying a bomb. He opens a briefcase just long enough for her to glimpse what look like red cylinders and a tangle of wires. Then he tells her what he wants. His demands are precise. $200,000 in $20 bills, 4 parachutes, 2 main, 2 reserve, and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the plane the moment it lands. No shouting, no panic, just a quiet man with a briefcase, holding a jet full of strangers hostage. The hijacker gave his name as Dan Cooper. In the chaos of that first night, a wire service reporter confused him with an unrelated early suspect named D.B. Cooper. And the wrong name is the one that stuck forever. The man himself never used the initials. America has spent 50 years hunting a ghost under a name he never gave. The plane circled Seattle for nearly 2 hours, while the FBI scrambled to assemble the cash and the parachutes. Crucially, before handing it over, agents photographed every bill and recorded the serial numbers. Remember that. It becomes the only thread that ever leads anywhere. Flight 305 landed at Seattle-Tacoma. Cooper kept his word to the letter. In exchange for the money and the parachutes, he released all 36 passengers and 2 of the flight attendants. He kept only who he needed: the captain, the first officer, the flight engineer, and 1 flight attendant, Tina Mucklow, to relay his instructions. Then he gave the cockpit a set of flying instructions that stopped the investigators cold. Fly toward Mexico City. Stay below 10,000 feet. Keep the speed under 200 knots. Wing flaps at 15 degrees, landing gear down, cabin unpressurized, and leave the rear air stair, the staircase that folds down from the tail of a 727, unlocked. Those are not random numbers. They are almost exactly the configuration a 727 needs to fly slow enough and low enough for a person to safely step off the rear stairs in midair. Cooper knew this aircraft. He knew a quirk of its design that most passengers would never dream of. Either he had flown, or jumped, or been trained by someone who had. That single detail is why so many investigators believe he was not an amateur. Around 7:40 in the evening, the 727 lifted off again into a cold, black, rainy night. Cooper ordered the crew to stay in the cockpit and pull the curtain shut. He was alone in the cabin now, with the money and the storm. Sometime after 8 o'clock, a warning light flickered in the cockpit. The aft stairway had been lowered. The crew felt a small change in cabin pressure. A soft bump, they later said, like the tail dipping and settling. Somewhere over the dark forests of southwestern Washington, in near-freezing rain and buffeting wind, Dan Cooper walked down those air stairs and stepped off into nothing. Of the 4 parachutes Cooper was given, one reserve was a non-functional training rig, sewn shut and useless for a real jump. Cooper cut one reserve apart, apparently for cord to strap the money to himself, but he did not take the dummy. He chose the working parachutes. To some investigators, that was proof he understood the gear. To others, it was simply luck. The plane continued south and landed in Reno, Nevada, with the aft stairs still hanging down and the cabin empty. The money was gone. The man was gone. The FBI opened a case they codenamed NORJAC, Northwest Hijacking, and one of the largest manhunts in the country's history began. They searched the ground beneath the flight path on foot, from the air, and by boat. They dragged and even put submarines into nearby Lake Merwin. They found no body, no parachute, no briefcase, no $20 bills. Nothing at all. Over the next 45 years, the FBI would investigate more than 800 suspects. The composite sketch of the calm man in the dark suit became one of the most recognizable faces in America, a face nobody could put a real name to. The Bureau's own working theory leaned grim: a night jump in a storm into rugged wilderness, wearing a business suit and slip-on loafers, with no reserve and no survival gear. The odds of surviving that were low. But low odds is not a body, and without a body, they could never close the door on the possibility that he'd walked away. Cooper also left a strange legacy in the sky itself. In the months after, a wave of copycats tried the same trick on other jets. In response, Boeing installed a small mechanical device on the 727 called the Cooper vane, a spring-loaded paddle that makes it physically impossible to lower the aft stairs while the plane is in flight. His crime rewrote the design of an airliner. Then, in 1980, 9 years later, the case cracked open just an inch. An 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was on a family outing along the Columbia River at a sandy spot called Tena Bar. Smoothing the sand to build a fire, he uncovered 3 bundles of disintegrating $20 bills, about $5,800 in all. The serial numbers matched the ransom exactly. It remains the only piece of physical Cooper evidence ever recovered in the entire case. But instead of an answer, it created a brand new mystery. Tena Bar was not on the expected flight path. The money turned up miles from where Cooper should have come down, buried in the sand in a way that didn't fit a simple parachute drop. Did the river carry it there over the years? Did he survive the jump and lose part of the cash? Did he die and the water do the rest? Half a century later, nobody can say. Over the decades, a handful of names have dominated the investigation. Richard McCoy hijacked a jet in an almost identical way, just months after Cooper. Same aircraft, same rear stairs escape, which made him an obvious candidate, though the physical descriptions never quite lined up. Kenneth Christensen, a Northwest Airlines employee and former paratrooper, was pushed hard by his own family and by later researchers. Robert Rackstraw, a former pilot and Army veteran with a colorful criminal history, became the centerpiece of a private cold case team that claimed to find a coded confession in Cooper's letters. The FBI was never convinced, and Dwayne Weber reportedly whispered a deathbed confession to his wife. 4 words: "I'm Dan Cooper." None of it was ever backed by hard evidence. In 2016, after 45 years, the FBI officially suspended its active investigation. Not solved, not closed. Suspended. an admission that the trail had simply gone as cold as the night Cooper jumped. Almost every mystery eventually gets solved. DNA cracks cold cases from the 1970s. Killers who thought they'd escaped are arrested in their 80s. But D.B. Cooper did something almost no criminal in modern history has managed. He committed an audacious, nationally televised crime, and then simply stepped out of a plane and out of the record entirely. No name, no body, no ending. Part of why he became a folk legend is that his crime hurt no one directly. No shot was fired. No hostage was harmed. He robbed an airline and vanished into a storm. And that let America do something strange. Turn a criminal into a kind of outlaw hero with t-shirts, tribute festivals, and endless barroom theories. But strip away the myth, and you're left with a real, unsolved puzzle. A man beat the FBI, the physics of a night jump, and 50 years of investigation. Or he died alone in the freezing woods within minutes, and we simply never found him. Both of those answers are extraordinary. Somewhere, there is a truth. Maybe in a patch of Washington forest that has never been searched. Maybe in a name a family has quietly protected for 2 generations. Maybe in the last private thoughts of a man who carried the whole thing to his grave. The plane landed safely. Every person aboard survived. And the polite man in the dark suit became the one ghost that American aviation has never been able to explain. If this one kept you guessing, you know what to do. Like it, share it, and subscribe. Because the best mysteries are the ones that were never meant to be solved. And this channel is full of them.